I had always believed that success would finally earn me the love I craved from my family. At 32, I stood at the pinnacle of my career as a senior architect at Morrison and Blake, one of Chicago's most prestigious design firms. The Lakefront Convention Center project was my baby, my masterpiece in progress. I had spent 18 months pouring every ounce of creativity and technical expertise into those blueprints, and the client presentation was scheduled for next Friday. Everything was finally falling into place. Or so I thought. The pain started on a Tuesday morning. I was in the conference room, spreading out elevation drawings across the massive oak table, when it hit me like a freight train. A searing, twisting agony that radiated from deep in my abdomen, so intense that the room tilted sideways. I remember gripping the edge of the table, my knuckles white, trying to breathe through it. My colleague Jason noticed first, his face going pale as he rushed to my side. Within 20 minutes, I was in an ambulance, sirens wailing as we tore through downtown traffic. The paramedic, a kind woman with gentle hands, kept asking me questions I could barely answer. All I could think about was calling my father, Robert Vance, the man who was about to become the chief executive officer of St. Jude Medical Center, one of the most respected hospitals in Illinois. Surely he would know what to do. Surely he would drop everything and come to me. The emergency room was a blur of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. They ran tests, scans, blood work. I lay there on that narrow gurney, shivering despite the blankets they piled on me, and dialed his number with trembling fingers. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice carrying that particular tone of irritation he reserved for interruptions. I could barely get the words out. "Dad, I am in the ER. They think something is seriously wrong. I need you." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the clink of glasses and murmured conversation in the background. His ceremony rehearsal dinner. I realized. The pre-celebration before tomorrow's big installation event. "Audrey," he said. And I could picture him pinching the bridge of his nose the way he always did when I disappointed him. "You are catastrophizing again. You have always been dramatic about these things. I am in the middle of the most important week of my career. Can this not wait until next week?" The pain chose that moment to spike again, and I gasped. "Dad, please. I am scared. We will talk about this later," he said curtly. "I cannot deal with your theatrics right now. Take some ibuprofen and get some rest. You are probably just stressed about your project." Then he hung up. I stared at my phone for a long moment, tears blurring my vision. The ER doctor came back with a grave expression, pulling up my CT scan on the computer monitor. "There was a mass on my right ovary," he explained. "Large. Concerning. They needed to admit me immediately and get me to a gynecologic oncologist as soon as possible." The word cancer hung unspoken in the air between us, heavy and terrifying. They moved me to a room upstairs by evening. Maria, my best friend since college, showed up within an hour of me texting her. She held my hand while Dr. Destine, Eleanor Rossi, the head of gynecologic oncology, came to discuss my case. Dr. Rossi was a striking woman in her late 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that seemed to see straight through to your soul. She had a reputation for being brilliant, exacting, and fiercely protective of her patients. She sat down beside my bed and went through the scans with me, pointing out the mass that had taken over my ovary. It was large, complex, and highly suspicious for malignancy. "We need to operate as soon as possible," she said gently. "Tomorrow morning, if you can be ready. This cannot wait." "My family," I managed to say. "My father is Robert Vance. He is being installed as CEO of St. Jude tomorrow." "Doctor." Rossi's eyebrows rose slightly. She knew exactly who my father was. Everyone in the hospital did. Robert Vance, the administrative wunderkind who had climbed the ranks with ruthless efficiency, promising to revolutionize patient care and family support systems. The irony was not lost on me. "Does your family know about this?" she asked carefully. I nodded, my throat tight. I called my dad. He said I was being dramatic, that he did not have time for my theatrics. Something flickered across Dr. Reese's, Rossi's face. Anger. Perhaps. Or disappointment. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I will be performing your surgery personally. Audrey, you will not be alone in this. And I think I need to have a conversation with your father about what constitutes a medical emergency." I tried to call my mother next, though I knew it was futile. Celeste Vance answered on the first ring. But her voice was distracted, already irritated. "Audrey, I am in the middle of getting ready for your father's ceremony." "What is so urgent, Mom?" "I am in the hospital. I have to have emergency surgery in the morning. I need you." "Oh. For heaven's sake." She sighed. "You always do this. You know, every time there is something important happening for this family, you find a way to make it about yourself. Remember your brother's graduation? You conveniently had the flu and ruined all the photos." "That was 6 years ago," I said weakly. "And I actually had the flu." "Mom, this is cancer. They think I have cancer. They think," she repeated, her tone dismissive. "So they do not know. It is probably just a cyst or something minor. Honestly, Audrey, this is the worst possible timing. Can you not wait until next week to have this looked at properly? The surgery is scheduled for 6 in the morning." I said, my voice hollow. "I thought you should know." "Well, you know we cannot possibly cancel," she said briskly. "This ceremony has been planned for months. Hundreds of people are coming. Your father's entire career depends on making the right impression tomorrow. I am sure you will be fine. You are young and healthy. Call us after your procedure and let us know how it went." She hung up before I could respond. Maria, who had heard every word through the phone speaker, looked murderous. "I cannot believe them," she hissed. "What kind of parents are these people?" I wish I could say I was surprised. But the truth was, this was exactly who my family had always been. My younger brother Leo was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. He was following in Dad's footsteps, already in his second year of medical school at Northwestern. Every family gathering was a celebration of Leo's achievements, Leo's potential, Leo's bright future. I was the daughter who had inexplicably chosen art and design over medicine. A choice my father never let me forget was a profound disappointment. I had spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to them, believing that if I just achieved enough, won enough awards, made enough money, they would finally see me, finally love me the way they loved Leo. But lying in that hospital bed, facing surgery and possibly cancer, I realized with crushing clarity that nothing I did would ever be enough. That night was the longest of my life. I barely slept, my mind racing between terror about the surgery and the hollow ache of abandonment. Maria stayed with me, dozing uncomfortably in the chair beside my bed, refusing to leave me alone. At 5 in the morning, the nurses came to prep me. Doctor. Rossi stopped by, still in her street clothes, and sat with me for a few minutes. "Your father is not coming." "Is he?" she asked quietly. I shook my head, not trusting myself to speak. "Then I will be your family today," she said firmly. "You are going to get through this, Audrey. And when you do, we are going to have some very serious conversations about what happened here." They wheeled me into the operating room at 6:15. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was Maria's face, tear-streaked but determined, and Dr. Rossi's steady voice telling me I was going to be okay. I woke up in the ICU 7 hours later. The surgery had been far more complicated than anyone anticipated. Dr. Rossi had found the cancer had spread beyond my ovary, requiring extensive excision of surrounding tissue. She had to call in a surgical oncologist to assist. They had worked for 7 straight hours to remove every visible trace of disease. I was groggy, disoriented, and in more pain than I had ever experienced. Tubes and wires connected me to various machines, all beeping and whirring in a discordant symphony. Maria was there, along with Dr. Rossi, both of them looking exhausted. "You made it through, Doctor," Rossi said gently. "The surgery went as well as could be expected given what we found. We are staging you at grade 2 ovarian cancer. You will need chemotherapy. But your prognosis is good. You are strong. Audrey." Through the fog of pain medication, I asked the question I was dreading. "Did anyone call?" Maria's jaw tightened. She pulled out her phone and held it up to show me. My father's Instagram account was displayed on the screen. There was a photo from an hour ago, taken at his installation ceremony. He stood in the center of a group of smiling people. My mother elegant beside him in a cream-colored suit. Leo beaming in his medical school attire. The caption read, "Blessed to be surrounded by my complete family on this momentous day. Saint. Jude's mission of putting patients and families first will always be my guiding principle. Complete family." The words hit me harder than any physical pain could. I was 3 floors below them, fighting for my life. And I did not even merit a mention. Maria saw my face and quickly put her phone away. But the damage was done. While I was recovering in the ICU, my father's installation ceremony was in full swing in the hospital's grand ballroom upstairs. I learned later that the event was everything he had dreamed of. 200 of Chicago's medical elite, politicians, donors, and media representatives filled the elegant space. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables laden with expensive catering. A string quartet played softly in the background. My father gave a speech that brought people to their feet. I heard about it from nurses who had been assigned to work the event. He spoke passionately about the importance of compassionate care, about always putting the patient and their family at the center of every decision. He promised to revolutionize St. Jude's family support programs, to ensure that no patient would ever feel alone or unsupported during their medical journey. The applause was thunderous. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. The picture of a supportive spouse. Leo stood beside them, proud and polished. They posed for photographs. They clinked champagne glasses. They laughed and networked and celebrated. And 3 floors below, I lay in the ICU, surrounded by machines, wondering how my family could be so utterly devoid of basic human decency. Dr. Rossi had been at the ceremony, as she was required to be as chief of surgery and chairman of the medical board. But she had not stayed long. According to Maria, she had excused herself after my father's speech and gone straight to the surgical lounge to change back into scrubs. Then she had done something that would change everything. She walked back into that ballroom in her surgical scrubs, still bearing faint traces of my blood on her sleeves despite having washed. The quartet was playing. People were mingling. And my father was holding court near the front, accepting congratulations. Dr. Rossi walked straight through the crowd to the microphone. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cutting through the pleasant chatter. "I apologize for the interruption, but there is something everyone here needs to know." The room fell silent. My father turned, his smile freezing on his face as he recognized her. "Mr. Vance." "Dr. Rossi continued, her voice steady and clear. "You spoke eloquently about St. Jude's commitment to patients and families, about compassionate care and support systems. I think everyone here deserves to know how you have demonstrated those values with your own family." She turned to address the room. 3 floors below us. At this very moment, Audrey Vance is recovering from a 7-hour emergency surgery for stage 2 ovarian cancer. She is your daughter, is she not, Mr. Vance? My father's face went white. Celeste gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Leo looked confused, as if he was hearing about this for the first time. Which, I realized later, he probably was. My parents had not even told him. Doctor. Rossi pulled out a tablet and projected images onto the large screen behind the podium. My CT scans appeared, showing the massive tumor that had nearly killed me. Medical records showed the timeline of my admission, the emergency nature of my case, the complexity of the surgery. When Miss Vance called her father yesterday from the emergency room, "Doctor," Rossi said, her voice hard as steel. He told her she was being dramatic, that he did not have time for her theatrics. When she called her mother, she was told this was bad timing and asked if she could wait until next week. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I learned later that several hospital board members looked shocked, while others seemed angry. The media representatives in attendance were frantically taking notes. This young woman, Doctor, Rossi continued, went into emergency surgery this morning alone except for her friend. Not one member of her family came to support her. Not one. And while she was fighting for her life in the operating room, you, Mr. Vance, were upstairs rehearsing your speech about family-centered care. My father tried to interrupt. This is a private family matter, he blustered. You have no right to discuss my daughter's medical information in this forum. Doctor. Rossi fixed him with a withering stare. Your daughter gave me explicit permission to share this information with you and with anyone I deemed necessary. And I deem it necessary because you are about to assume leadership of this hospital, with direct oversight of our patient and family support programs. How can we trust you to implement compassionate policies for our patients when you cannot even show basic human decency to your own child? The room erupted. Harrison Thorne, the chairman of the board of directors, stood up and made his way to the front. Mr. Knott Vance, he said grimly, I think we need to have a serious discussion about this situation. Please come with me. My father's installation ceremony ended in chaos. The celebration turned into whispered conversations and shocked faces. My mother tried to salvage the situation, claiming there had been a misunderstanding. But no one was listening. Leo, to his credit, immediately left the ballroom and came down to the ICU. He stood outside my room, looking through the window at me hooked up to all those machines, and I saw something crack in his carefully constructed worldview. Over the next few days, as I drifted in and out of consciousness in the ICU, the fallout accelerated. The story leaked to the press, though Dr. Rossi maintained it was not from her. Local news stations ran segments about the hospital CEO whose daughter had emergency cancer surgery while he partied upstairs. Social media exploded. Patient advocacy groups demanded answers. The hospital board launched a formal investigation. My father called my hospital room 4 days after my surgery. I was awake, stronger, but still weak and in pain. Maria answered my phone and nearly hung up on him. But I shook my head. I wanted to hear what he had to say. He did not ask how I was. He did not apologize. Instead, he launched into a tirade about how I had ruined his career, how ungrateful I was after everything he had provided for me. How dare I allow that doctor to humiliate him in front of the entire Chicago medical community? Did I have any idea what I had done to him? Did I understand that 15 years of hard work were now destroyed because of my selfishness? I listened to him rant, feeling nothing. The man on the other end of that phone was a stranger. No, that was not quite right. He'd always been exactly this person. I had just refused to see it. Doctor. Rossi walked into my room in the middle of his rant. I had the phone on speaker, too weak to hold it to my ear. She heard every word. Without hesitation, she took the phone from me. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice icy. This is Dr. Rossi. Your daughter did not ruin your career. Your daughter did not make you choose a party over emergency surgery. Your daughter did not force you to demonstrate breathtaking cruelty to your own child. You did that entirely on your own. And the fact that you are calling her now, not to apologize or ask about her recovery, but to blame her for the consequences of your actions, tells me everything I need to know about your character. She hung up on him. Then she sat down beside my bed and took my hand. I am so sorry you have had to deal with this your whole life, she said softly. But I promise you, Audrey, you are going to survive this. And when you do, you are going to build a life so much better than anything they ever gave you. The hospital board's investigation revealed that my father's lack of compassion was not an isolated incident. Multiple employees came forward with stories of him denying medical leave requests, calling sick days convenient excuses, and showing general disdain for work-life balance and family emergencies. One nurse testified that she had been written up for taking time off when her mother was dying because it was inconvenient for department scheduling. Within 2 weeks, the board reached a decision. Robert Vance's installation as CEO was formally revoked. He was placed on administrative leave pending further review. The position went to the runner-up candidate, a woman named Patricia Alvarez, who had 20 years of experience in hospital administration and a stellar reputation for staff support. My mother called once, 3 weeks after my surgery. I was back in my apartment by then, doing outpatient chemotherapy and slowly regaining my strength. She wanted to know if I would be willing to release a statement saying there had been a misunderstanding, that my parents had been supportive and the media had blown everything out of proportion. No, I said simply. But Audrey, she pleaded, this is destroying our family. Your father has lost everything. Leo is being harassed at school. People recognize me at the grocery store and say terrible things. You have to fix this. I have to fix this? I repeated, my voice rising despite my weakness. I had cancer. Mom. I almost died. And you think the problem here is your reputation? We are your family, she said, her voice taking on that sharp edge I knew so well. Family forgives. Family supports each other through difficult times. I laughed. And it was not a pleasant sound. You are absolutely right, Mom. Family should support each other through difficult times. Like when a daughter has emergency cancer surgery. For example, that would be an excellent time for family support. But you were too busy worrying about appearances. She hung up on me. 2 weeks later, she filed for divorce from my father. Not out of any moral awakening. I learned through Leo. But because being married to him had become socially toxic in their circles. She moved back to her family estate in Connecticut and began telling people she had been a victim of my father's emotional abuse. A narrative that was not entirely false but was certainly convenient. Leo surprised me. He showed up at my apartment one evening, looking haggard and uncertain. Can we talk? He asked. I let him in. We sat in my living room. And for the first time in our lives, we had an honest conversation. He told me that he had idolized our father, built his entire identity around being the son who made Dad proud. Seeing what happened to me had shattered that worldview. He had started therapy, he said. He was beginning to understand how toxic our family dynamics had always been. I am sorry, he said. And he was crying. I am so sorry, Audrey. For everything. For every time I made fun of you or minimized your feelings or acted like you were the problem. I was wrong. They were wrong. And I cannot believe it took you almost dying for me to see it. It was not a full reconciliation. Not yet. There were too many years of hurt between us. But it was a start. The chemotherapy was brutal. 6 cycles over 18 weeks. Each one leaving me weaker and sicker than before. But Maria was there for every single appointment, holding my hand through the infusions. Doctor. Rossi checked on me personally after each session. And slowly, unexpectedly, I found myself surrounded by a support system I had never known I could have. Other patients at the cancer center reached out to me after my story went public. Women who had felt alone, who had struggled with unsupportive families, who had been made to feel like their illness was an inconvenience. They shared their stories with me, and I shared mine with them. We formed an informal support group, meeting weekly in a conference room Dr. Rossi arranged for us to use. I started writing about my experience. At first, it was just for myself. A way to process everything that had happened. But Maria encouraged me to start a blog, and, somewhat hesitantly, I did. I called it Surviving More Than Cancer. And I wrote about the isolation of serious illness, the trauma of family abandonment, and the long journey of learning to value yourself when the people who were supposed to love you simply could not. The blog took off in ways I never expected. Thousands of people read my posts. Hundreds commented, sharing their own stories of family dysfunction and medical trauma. Media outlets reached out for interviews. Patient advocacy organizations invited me to speak at conferences. My father tried to contact me multiple times during this period. Letters, emails, messages through Leo. He never apologized, never acknowledged that he had done anything wrong. Instead, he wanted to know if I would help him salvage his reputation, if I would publicly state that our estrangement was mutual, if I would please stop giving interviews that made him look bad. I blocked his number. I returned his letters unopened. I focused on my recovery and on building something meaningful from my pain. 8 months after my diagnosis, I was declared cancer-free. The scans were clear. My tumor markers were normal. And Dr. Rossi gave me the news with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she said, hugging me tightly. "You beat it." But the real victory was not just surviving the cancer. It was realizing that I had spent my entire life seeking validation from people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. It was understanding that their failure to love me properly was about them, not about me. It was learning to set boundaries and enforce them, even when it meant losing the family I had always wished I had. Dr. Rossi invited me to join St. E. Jude's newly formed Patient and Family Advisory Council, a program created in the wake of my father's scandal. The hospital was serious about reform, about truly putting patients and families at the center of care. They wanted people who had experienced the healthcare system from the patient side to help shape policies and programs. I accepted. And 6 months later, when Dr. Rossi asked if I would consider a permanent position as patient advocate and program developer, I accepted that too. My architecture career had stalled during my illness. And while Morrison and Blake had been supportive, I found I no longer had the passion for it that I once did. Working at St. E. Jude, helping to build systems that would prevent other patients from feeling as alone as I had felt, gave me purpose in a way designing buildings never had. A year and a half after my surgery, I stood on a stage at the National Healthcare Leadership Conference in Washington, D.C. The auditorium held over 1,000 people, hospital administrators and medical professionals from across the country. I was there to give a keynote address on patient-centered care and the importance of institutional compassion. I told my story. All of it. The emergency surgery. My family's abandonment. My father's hypocrisy. And Dr. Rossi's courage in exposing it. I talked about the systemic changes St. Jude had implemented and the measurable improvements in patient satisfaction and outcomes. I discussed the importance of leaders practicing what they preach, of institutions holding their executives accountable to the values they claim to uphold. The speech was scheduled for 30 minutes. I spoke for 45. And no one seemed to notice or care. When I finished, the entire auditorium rose in a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. Dr. Rossi was in the front row, beaming with pride. Harrison Thorne, St. Jude's board chairman, stood beside her, nodding in approval. Afterward, dozens of people approached me. Other patients who had similar experiences. Healthcare executives who wanted to implement similar programs at their institutions. Medical students who thanked me for reminding them why they had chosen medicine in the first place. And in the back of the room, barely visible in the crowd, I saw my father. He looked older, diminished somehow. He was working as a consultant now. I had heard. Doing contract work for small clinics and medical groups. No major hospital would touch him. He had become a cautionary tale in healthcare administration circles. The executive whose spectacular fall from grace served as a reminder that leadership required more than business acumen. Our eyes met across the room. He looked like he wanted to approach me. but something in my expression must have stopped him. I was not angry anymore. I was not hurt or seeking his approval. I was simply indifferent. He had become irrelevant to my life. A character in a painful story that I had moved beyond. I turned away and walked out of the auditorium with Maria and Dr. Rossi, leaving him standing alone in the crowd. That evening, Dr. Rossi took Maria and me out to dinner at a beautiful restaurant overlooking the Potomac River. We ordered expensive wine and celebrated not just my speech, but everything we had all been through together. Dr. Rossi told us that St. Jude's board had approved funding for a major expansion of the patient advocacy program, and they wanted me to lead it. Your father called me. Dr. Rossi mentioned casually as we were finishing dessert. He saw your speech. He wanted to know if I could arrange a meeting between the two of you. I took a sip of my wine, considering. What did you tell him? I told him that you are building a meaningful life, doing important work, and that he should focus on learning from his mistakes rather than trying to insert himself back into your story. She smiled slightly. I may have also mentioned that the best thing he could do for you at this point is to leave you alone. Thank you, I said quietly. You know, Dr. B, Rossi said thoughtfully, watching the lights reflect on the river. When this all started, I was angry. Angry at your father for his cruelty, angry at the system that had elevated someone like him to leadership. But watching you over these past 18 months, seeing you transform your pain into purpose, I realized something important. What is that? Maria asked. That the best revenge is not making them suffer. Doctor, Rossi said, looking at me with warmth. The best revenge is becoming so fully yourself, so genuinely happy and successful, that their absence from your life becomes their loss, not yours. That is what you have done. Audrey. You have won. I thought about that as we left the restaurant and walked along the waterfront. I thought about the girl I had been, desperate for her father's approval, willing to sacrifice anything for the illusion of family love. And I thought about the woman I had become, standing on stages and sharing my story, helping other patients find their voices, building a career around compassion and advocacy. 2 years after my diagnosis, I moved into a beautiful loft apartment in Lincoln Park with floor-to-ceiling windows and exposed brick walls. I decorated it exactly how I wanted, with bold colors and eclectic art and absolutely no compromises for anyone else's taste. I adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier mix named Scout who had also survived more than anyone should have to. I started dating again, slowly and carefully. I was learning what healthy relationships looked like, learning to recognize red flags early, learning that I deserved kindness and respect and genuine affection. It was not easy. Undoing decades of conditioning that taught me love was something you had to earn through sacrifice. But I was getting there. Leo and I maintained contact, though our relationship was still complicated. He had finished medical school and was doing his residency in pediatrics. He had completely cut off contact with our father and had minimal contact with our mother. We met for coffee every few weeks. And slowly, carefully, we were building something new. Not the sibling relationship we should have had, but something honest and real. My mother reached out occasionally, usually when she wanted something or when she was feeling nostalgic. I kept those interactions brief and boundaried. I had learned that I could not change her, could not make her suddenly develop empathy or maternal instinct she had never possessed. But I could control how much access she had to my life and my energy. My father, I heard nothing from. Whether Dr. Rossi's message had gotten through or he had simply given up, I did not know. Occasionally, I would hear updates through the medical community grapevine. He was still working, still consulting, still presumably telling himself that he had been the victim of a witch hunt rather than the architect of his own downfall. I hoped, distantly, that someday he would gain some insight, but I was not holding my breath. And more importantly, I was not waiting for it. 3 years after my surgery, on the anniversary of that terrible day, I organized a survivor celebration at St. Jude. We invited everyone who had been part of my treatment team, all the patients from our support group, and families who had benefited from the new advocacy programs. Dr. Rossi gave a speech about the importance of institutional change and individual courage. I stood in front of that room full of people. People who had shown me more genuine love and support than my biological family ever had. And I felt something I had never quite experienced before. I felt whole. Not healed from the cancer. Because cancer changes you forever. Leaves scars that never quite fade. But healed from the deeper wounds. The ones that had nothing to do with tumors and everything to do with learning to love myself in the absence of anyone else's approval. I thought about the girl who had collapsed in that conference room, clutching her stomach and whispering her father's name. I thought about how desperately she had wanted him to care, how much she had been willing to endure for the hope of one day being enough. And I wished I could go back and tell her what I knew now. That she was already enough. That she had always been enough. That the problem was never her. That she would survive the cancer. Yes. But more than that. She would survive the family that should have killed her spirit long before any tumor had the chance. That she would find her people. The ones who showed up without being asked. Who held her hand through the worst moments. Who celebrated her victories as if they were their own. That she would build a life so full and rich and meaningful that the absence of those who failed to love her would fade into insignificance. That she would stand on stages and share her story and help other people find their own strength. That she would be happy. Genuinely. Fully. Authentically happy. I looked out at Maria, who had never wavered. Never faltered. Never questioned whether I was worth her time and energy. I looked at Dr. Rossi, who had risked professional backlash to stand up for what was right. I looked at all the patients and families who had let me into their lives, who had trusted me to help them navigate the terrifying landscape of serious illness. This was my family now. Not bound by blood or obligation, but by choice and compassion and shared experience. This was what love looked like. This was what I deserved all along. My father's voice echoed in my memory one last time. You ruined my career. You destroyed everything I worked for. No, I thought, raising my glass in a toast as the room filled with laughter and conversation. I saved myself. I found my voice. I built something beautiful from the ashes of your cruelty. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. The room erupted in cheers. And I smiled, genuinely and completely. Somewhere in the city, Robert Vance was living with the consequences of his choices. Alone and diminished. But I was here, surrounded by light and love and purpose. I had survived. More than that, I had thrived. And absolutely nothing he could say or do would ever take that away from me. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Dr. Rossi pulled me aside. I am proud of you, she said simply. Not because of what you have accomplished, though that is impressive, but because of who you have become. You took an impossible situation and you chose life. You chose yourself. That takes more courage than most people ever find. I hugged her tightly. This woman who had saved my life in more ways than one. Thank you, I said. For everything. For seeing me when no one else would. For giving me a chance to turn my pain into something that matters. That was all you, she replied. I just opened a door. You were the one brave enough to walk through it. Maria and I walked home together that night, Scout trotting happily between us. The Chicago skyline glittered against the dark sky, and the spring air was warm and full of promise. We talked about everything and nothing, the way true friends do. We made plans for the weekend, discussed Maria's new relationship, laughed about the terrible hospital cafeteria food. When we reached my building, Maria hugged me goodnight. You know what I love most about you now? She asked. What is that? You finally know your own worth, she said. You finally understand that you were never the problem. It took you almost dying to figure it out, but you got there. And watching you step into your power, watching you use your voice to help other people, It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, Scout racing ahead of me, and unlocked the door to my home, my space, my sanctuary that no one could take from me or taint with their dysfunction. I made a cup of tea and stood at my window, looking out over the city. Somewhere out there, people were struggling with toxic families, with feeling unseen and unvalued, with the crushing weight of trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. I thought about all the speeches I would give, all the programs I would help develop, all the lives I might touch with my story. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Rossi. It was a photo of an email she had received from the American Hospital Association. They wanted to feature St. Jude's patient advocacy program as a case study for a national initiative. My work, our work, was spreading beyond Chicago, creating ripples of change across the country. I smiled and set down my phone. Tomorrow, I would respond. Tomorrow, I would dive back into the work that gave my life meaning. Tomorrow, I would continue building this new life. This beautiful life that I had fought so hard to create. But tonight, I would simply sit in my peaceful apartment, with my loyal dog at my feet, and feel grateful. Grateful for survival. Grateful for second chances. Grateful for the family I had chosen and who had chosen me in return. Most of all, grateful that I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. That love is not something you have to earn through suffering and sacrifice. Real love is freely given, without conditions, without strings, without the constant fear that one mistake will make you unworthy of it. And anyone who makes you feel otherwise does not deserve a place in your life, no matter what title they hold or what DNA you share. I was Audrey Vance, cancer survivor, patient advocate, daughter of a cruel man whose influence over my life had finally, blessedly, ended. And I was free. The best revenge, Dr. Rossi had said, is becoming so fully yourself that their absence becomes their loss. Standing in my apartment that night, feeling the weight of hard-won peace settle over me like a blanket, I understood exactly what she meant. I had won, not by destroying them, but by refusing to let them destroy me. And that made all the difference.